3 hours ago, I was nobody, a ghost, a girl the world had already buried and forgotten. My own mother had thrown a memorial service, worn black and cried pretty tears for the cameras. She told everyone I was troubled, unstable, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. And then she took my inheritance and bought herself a mansion. 3 hours ago, I was still that forgotten girl. But right now, I'm standing across the street from that mansion, watching flames lick the windows of her home office. My phone won't stop buzzing. FBI agents are shouting into radios. Firefighters are running past me with hoses. And somewhere inside that chaos, my mother is finally understanding what it feels like to lose everything. She wanted to forget me. She called me a mistake. Well, Mother, consider this your wake-up call. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back to when I was just Trinity Potter, a 19-year-old girl who made the mistake of trusting family. I'm Trinity. I'm 28 now, but this story starts when I was 19, the night before my birthday, the night my life was stolen from me. And before I go any further, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It helps more than you know. Thank you. I grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Nice town, good schools, the kind of place where people wave at each other and pretend everything is perfect, even when it's falling apart. My parents divorced when I was 12, and honestly, it was a relief. The fighting had been brutal. The silence between fights even worse. My dad, Marcus Potter, was a firefighter. The real deal. The kind of man who ran into burning buildings and somehow still made it home to help me with homework. He wasn't perfect, but he loved me in that simple, steady way that makes you feel safe in the world. My mother, Diane, was a different story. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. The kind of beautiful that makes people forgive things they shouldn't forgive. She had this way of walking into a room and making everyone notice her, making everyone want her approval. I spent most of my childhood trying to earn that approval. Spoiler alert, I never did. After the divorce, Diane got full custody. She had a better lawyer, a better story, and honestly, a better performance. She cried in court about being abandoned, about struggling to raise me alone. Never mind that Dad paid child support on time every single month. Never mind that he showed up for every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference while she was getting her nails done. The court believed her tears. Courts usually do. But Dad didn't give up on me. He got every other weekend, and he made those weekends count. We'd go fishing or hiking or just sit on his porch and talk about nothing. Those weekends were my oxygen. They kept me sane in a house where I always felt like an inconvenience. Here's the thing about my family that you need to understand. There was money, real money. My grandmother on my dad's side, Eleanor Potter, had built a small real estate empire back in the 70s. Nothing flashy. Just smart investments, rental properties, commercial buildings that appreciated over decades. By the time I was born, Grandma Eleanor was worth millions, and she loved me. God, she loved me. I was her only grandchild, and she treated me like I was the most precious thing in the world. When I was little, she'd take me to her office and teach me about business. When I was older, she'd tell me stories about how she built everything from nothing, how she'd been underestimated her whole life and used it as fuel. She also saw my mother for exactly what she was. I remember one Thanksgiving, Grandma Eleanor pulled me aside and said something I never forgot. She said, "Trinity, some people love you for who you are, and some people love you for what you can give them. Learn to tell the difference early because it'll save you a lot of heartache." I thought I understood. I didn't. Not really. When I turned 18, Grandma Eleanor's lawyers called me. She had passed away the year before, peacefully in her sleep at 83, but she'd left instructions, very specific instructions. There was a trust fund with my name on it, $4.2 million to be officially transferred to me on my 19th birthday. $4.2 million. I was a teenager working part-time at a bookstore, saving up for community college textbooks. I couldn't even comprehend that number. It felt fake, like Monopoly money. But you know who comprehended it just fine? My mother. Diane had always assumed she'd inherit something from Eleanor. She was the mother of Eleanor's only grandchild, after all. She'd played nice at family gatherings, complimented Eleanor's cooking, pretended to care about her stories. In Diane's mind, she'd earned a piece of that pie. When she found out everything was going to me and nothing to her, something shifted behind her eyes. I saw it. that cold, calculating look she usually reserved for business deals and divorce negotiations. Suddenly, I wasn't just her inconvenient daughter, I was an obstacle. 6 months after my parents' divorce, my mother remarried. His name was Victor Hale, and on paper, he was perfect. Successful businessman, charming smile, drove a Mercedes, always had a tan like he'd just stepped off a yacht. He brought flowers on every date, opened doors, said all the right things. I hated him immediately. There was something wrong behind his eyes, the same kind of cold I'd started seeing in my mother's. When he looked at me, I felt like I was being measured, appraised, like he was calculating my worth down to the penny. He asked too many questions about school, about my plans, about my grandmother's estate. He'd phrase them casually like small talk, but I noticed. He also had a daughter from a previous marriage. Bethany was my age, blonde like her father, and she moved into our house like she owned the place. From day one, she made it clear that she considered me competition. For what, I wasn't sure. Attention, space, the bathroom in the morning. Turns out she was competing for something much bigger. The night everything changed was the night before my 19th birthday. I was supposed to meet my dad the next morning to sign the final trust documents. The money would officially become mine. I could pay for college, travel, maybe buy a little house near my dad. I had so many plans. That night, I went to a friend's birthday party. Small gathering, nothing crazy. I called for a ride home around 11 and Victor offered to pick me up. My mother was supposedly asleep and he was being helpful. I should have called an Uber. I should have walked. I should have done anything other than get in that car. I remember the drive starting normally. Victor asking about the party, about my friends, about my plans for my birthday. Then he handed me a bottle of water, said I looked thirsty. The last thing I remember is the water tasting slightly off, metallic, strange. I woke up in darkness. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The kind of nightmare where you can't move, can't scream, can't make sense of anything, but the cold concrete floor was real. The single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling was real. The heavy door with no handle on the inside was very, very real. I was in a basement that had been converted into a small living space, like someone had planned this. There was a cot, a toilet behind a curtain, a small shelf with books. It looked almost thoughtful, almost humane, which somehow made it worse. For 3 days, no one came. I screamed until my voice gave out. I pounded on the door until my hands bled. I searched every inch of that room for a way out and found nothing. On the 4th day, Victor walked in. He looked at me the same way he always had, that appraising, calculating stare, and he explained everything so calmly, so rationally, like he was discussing a business proposal over coffee. He told me there was going to be a change of plans regarding my trust fund. He said I was going to sign some documents giving power of attorney to my mother. He said if I cooperated, I would live comfortably. Nice food, books to read, no harm done. I asked him where my mother was. I asked him if she knew what he'd done. He laughed. Actually laughed. And he said something that still echoes in my nightmares. He said, "Trinity, whose car do you think is parked outside right now?" I didn't believe him. I couldn't believe him. Mothers don't do this to their daughters. Not real mothers. Not even bad mothers. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, I already knew it was true. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I refused to sign anything. Victor would visit, always calm, always patient, like he had all the time in the world. He'd bring newspapers, show me headlines about myself. At first, they were hopeful. Missing teen. Family pleads for information. Search continues for Ridgewood girl. My father's face, haggard and desperate at a press conference. Then, 6 months in, the headlines changed. Missing heiress presumed dead. Mother holds memorial service. There was a photo. My mother in black, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Bethany beside her, appropriately somber. A crowd of people I barely knew gathered to mourn a girl who wasn't dead. Victor explained the legal situation like he was proud of it. Without me to claim the trust, and with me declared legally dead, the money would go to my next of kin, my mother. It was clean, simple, elegant. They'd planned this from the beginning. The marriage, the timing, all of it. I was never their family. I was their payday. After the first year, Victor moved me. The basement was too risky, too close to town. He had a property upstate, A farmhouse on 50 acres of nothing. No neighbors, no passing cars, no chance of anyone hearing me scream. The new room was slightly bigger. Same setup though. Cot, toilet, books. A small window near the ceiling that showed me sky but nothing else. I could tell seasons by the light. Watch years pass in shades of gray and blue. Victor visited once a week, sometimes less. He'd bring supplies, newspapers, updates on the outside world. He seemed to enjoy showing me what my money was buying. A new mansion for my mother, luxury vacations in Europe, designer clothes, expensive cars, country club memberships, my $4.2 million spent on everything I'd never wanted. Bethany moved into my grandmother's house, the house where I'd learned about business and life and love, the house where Eleanor had told me to learn the difference between people who loved me and people who wanted something from me. Bethany redecorated it, painted over the walls that held my grandmother's memories, threw away furniture that had been in the family for generations. She posted photos on social media, which Victor loved to show me. "Look at her living your life," he'd say. "Doesn't that make you want to cooperate?" It made me want to survive. That's what it made me. In year 3, I saw something in the newspapers that nearly broke me. Bethany's engagement announcement. She was marrying Derek Chen. Derek Chen. My Derek. My high school boyfriend. The boy who'd held my hand at junior prom. Who'd talked about our future together. Who'd kissed me goodbye the week before I disappeared. He'd moved on. Of course he had. I was dead after all. But seeing his face next to Bethany's, seeing them smile at each other in engagement photos, something inside me cracked. All the hope I'd been holding on to, all the fantasies about rescue and reunion, they crumbled like old paper. Victor noticed. He always noticed. He told me my father had stopped looking after year 2. He said everyone had forgotten me. He said the world moved on, and I was nothing but a ghost story now. A cautionary tale parents told their children about accepting rides from strangers. I wanted to believe he was lying. I had to believe he was lying. Because if he wasn't, if everyone really had forgotten, then what was I surviving for? I held on to my grandmother's words like a life raft. Potter women don't break. We bend and then we snap back. I bent. God, I bent so far I thought I'd shatter, but I didn't break. Years passed. I learned to survive in that room. I exercised to keep my body strong. I read every book Victor brought, keeping my mind sharp. I watched, I listened, I waited. Victor had an assistant who delivered supplies sometimes, a quiet woman named Rosa, maybe 40, with sad eyes and careful movements. She never spoke to me, barely looked at me, but I noticed things about her. Bruises on her wrists, a flinch when Victor raised his voice, the way she moved around him like someone navigating a minefield. Victor controlled her too. I didn't know how, didn't know the details, but I recognized a fellow prisoner when I saw one. In year 7, something changed. Victor got careless. He'd been doing this so long, been so confident in his control, that he stopped checking corners, stopped covering his tracks. He left mail visible with the property address. He talked on the phone where I could hear. He forgot to lock the door once, just for a second before catching himself. I cataloged everything, every detail, every pattern, every weakness. I didn't know how I'd use it, but I knew I'd need it. Year 8, I found the phone. I was cleaning my room, something I did obsessively just to have a task, when I noticed a loose brick near the floor. Behind it was a small hollow space, and in that space was a phone, an ancient Nokia. The kind that was indestructible and held a charge forever. It had 12% battery left and no SIM card, but it could connect to Wi-Fi. I almost cried. I almost screamed. Instead, I shoved it back in the wall and pretended nothing had happened. For weeks, I rationed that battery like it was gold. I'd turn the phone on for minutes at a time, searching for Wi-Fi signals, finding nothing. The farmhouse was too remote. But then I remembered the lamp. The old lamp in my room had a USB port, something I'd never thought about because I had nothing to charge. I took the lamp apart, carefully, methodically, hiding the pieces whenever Victor visited. I rigged a charging system using wire from a book binding and sheer desperation. It worked. It actually worked. I had maybe 20 minutes of power now. Enough for one call, maybe 2. I needed information before I called anyone. I needed to know what I was walking into. So I started watching Victor more carefully, asking Rosa questions she wouldn't answer, piecing together a puzzle that had held me captive for 8 years. Then Rosa surprised me. I slipped her a note one day, hidden in the bathroom where Victor couldn't see. "I know he hurts you too. Help me and we both get free." She didn't respond. For weeks, nothing. I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Thought she'd tell Victor. Thought I'd just sealed my own fate. But one morning, when she brought my breakfast, there was a piece of paper hidden under the plate. Her handwriting was shaky, scared, but clear. "Your father never stopped looking. He's in Ridgewood still. Here's his number." My father, my dad, he never stopped. Victor had lied. Everyone had lied. But Marcus Potter, that stubborn, wonderful firefighter of a man, had never given up on me. Rosa gave me more information over the following weeks, piece by piece. She told me Victor would be gone for an entire weekend soon. There was a big event happening, a 50th birthday party for Diane. The whole family would be there celebrating. 50. My mother was turning 50, and she was throwing herself a party with my money while I rotted in a room 90 miles away. But here's the thing about being angry for 9 years. It clarifies things. It burns away everything that doesn't matter until you're left with pure, cold purpose. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice, and I was finally going to get it. Rosa told me one more thing, something that hurt almost more than the kidnapping itself. Every year on my birthday, my mother visited the farmhouse. She came to see me, to check that I was still contained, still controlled, still unable to ruin her perfect, stolen life. I thought back to those visits, the door opening once a year, footsteps I didn't recognize, the scent of expensive perfume drifting into my room. I'd always thought it was someone Victor hired. I never let myself imagine it was her, but it was. Every birthday for 9 years, my mother came to my prison and made sure the door was still locked. Rosa heard her once, heard Diane tell Victor that I was too much like my father, that this was cleaner than divorce, that some mistakes are better buried. I was her mistake, her buried mistake. On Friday night of the birthday weekend, Victor left. Rosa unlocked my door at 3 in the morning and told me I had until Sunday night before she'd have to report me missing. I looked at her, this woman who'd been brave enough to help me when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I asked her to come with me. She shook her head. She said she'd slow me down, that she had her own plan, that she'd give me a head start, but couldn't risk more than that. I hugged her, this stranger who'd saved my life, and then I ran. Have you ever experienced freedom after years without it? I don't mean leaving work for the weekend or finishing a long project. I mean real freedom, after real captivity. The first breath of outside air felt like drowning in reverse. The stars above me were so bright they hurt my eyes. I'd forgotten stars could look like that. I ran through woods I'd never seen, following the moon, heading towards sounds of distant traffic. By dawn, I reached a highway. I looked like a ghost, probably, thin, pale, wild-eyed, wearing clothes that had been washed 1,000 times. I must have been terrifying. A truck driver stopped anyway, asked if I was okay. I told him I'd escaped a bad relationship, which wasn't exactly a lie. He drove me to the nearest town, bought me coffee at a diner, and didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. In the bathroom of that diner, I turned on the Nokia and connected to their Wi-Fi. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely tap the numbers, but I dialed my father's phone, the number Rosa had given me, and I waited. 3 rings, then his voice, older, tired, but unmistakably him. I couldn't speak at first. 9 years of silence had made words feel impossible. But then I heard him say hello again, confused, about to hang up. And I said it. I said, "Dad, it's Trinity. I'm alive." The sound he made wasn't words. It was 9 years of grief releasing all at once. It was every prayer he'd whispered, every lead he'd chased, every night he'd stared at my photo, wondering if he'd ever know the truth. All of it, compressed into one broken sob. He drove 5 hours to pick me up. I saw his car pull into the diner parking lot, saw him step out looking older and grayer, but exactly like my dad. We stood in that parking lot and held each other for 20 minutes. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. In the car, I told him everything. Victor, the basement, the farmhouse, the years of captivity. I told him about my mother's involvement, watched his face go through shock and rage and heartbreak. He'd suspected her. He'd always suspected her. But suspecting and knowing are different things. He'd spent 9 years gathering evidence, he told me, hiring private investigators, filing complaints, pushing police detectives who wanted the case closed. Everyone told him I was dead. Everyone told him to move on. Diane had testified at my death, hearing that I'd had mental health issues, that I'd probably run away and met with some tragedy. She'd cried so convincingly that even the skeptics believed her. But Marcus Potter didn't believe. Marcus Potter never stopped looking. He had documents at home. Financial records showing Diane accessed my trust within a week of my death being declared. Business filings proving Victor's company was funded by Diane before they'd even married publicly, suggesting the whole relationship was planned. Testimony from witnesses who'd seen Victor acting suspicious in the months before my disappearance. He'd built a case for 9 years. He just didn't have me to prove any of it. Now he did. And hey, if you could hit that subscribe button, leave a like, maybe drop a comment about what you think should happen next, you'd be making my whole day. This story is for you, and I'm so grateful you're here. Dad had a friend, Howard Patterson, retired FBI agent. He'd worked missing persons cases for 30 years, and Trinity's case had always bothered him. The evidence of foul play was there, but political pressure from Diane's connections had kept it classified as a probable runaway. Howard was 72 years old and still sharp as a knife. When Dad called him at 6 in the morning saying Trinity's alive, Howard didn't ask questions. He just said, "Bring her to me." We drove to Howard's house, a modest place filled with files and caseboards and the evidence of a lifetime spent chasing justice. He listened to my story, asked precise questions, made notes in a leather journal. Then he made calls. This was federal now, he explained. Kidnapping across state lines, false imprisonment, fraud. The FBI would want to move fast before Victor and Diane realized I'd escaped. But I had a different idea. Howard wanted to do this quietly. Arrest them in their homes, avoid publicity, build an airtight case. It was the smart approach, the professional approach. It was also wrong. I wanted Diane to know it was me. I wanted to look into her eyes and show her that the mistake she'd tried to bury had clawed her way back to the surface. I wanted the whole world to see what she'd done. Howard warned me it could go wrong, that emotions make bad strategy, that revenge fantasies rarely survive contact with reality. I told him this wasn't revenge. This was justice, and justice deserves to be seen. He agreed to let me have one confrontation, one moment before the arrests. After that, I'd step back and let the law do its job. We made a plan. Saturday night, Diane's 50th birthday party. The country club was lit up like a palace. Valets parking luxury cars, guests in designer gowns, champagne flowing like water. 200 people had come to celebrate my mother's half-century of existence. 200 people eating canapes bought with my inheritance, toasting a woman who'd imprisoned her own daughter. I watched from a parked car across the street. My father sat beside me, tense and silent. We could see the party through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Diane gliding through the room like a queen, accepting compliments, laughing at jokes. She wore diamonds around her neck, diamonds that should have been mine, diamonds that my grandmother probably would have wanted me to have on my wedding day. And there was Bethany, my stepsister, my replacement, twirling to show off her engagement ring to anyone who'd look. Derek stood beside her, handsome and hollow, clapping along with the crowd when Diane made a toast. 9 years ago, that could have been my life. Those could have been my friends, my celebration, my future. Instead, I'd spent nearly a decade counting ceiling tiles and rationing hope like food stamps. But tonight wasn't about what I'd lost. Tonight was about what I was going to take back. While everyone celebrated at the country club, Dad and I drove to Diane's mansion. The security system was expensive but predictable. Dad had studied it for years, hoping for exactly this moment. We had maybe 2 hours before the party ended, 2 hours to find the evidence that would bury my mother forever. I walked through the front door of a house I'd never seen before. My mother had bought it 3 years ago, according to public records. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a pool, a wine cellar, all paid for with money that was supposed to be mine. The strangest part was the photos, or rather the absence of them. Every wall, every shelf, every surface was covered with pictures of Diane. Diane at galas, Diane on vacation, Diane with celebrities and politicians, and anyone who made her look important. But there wasn't a single photo of me. Not one. It was like I'd never existed. I knew I should have felt sad about that, but honestly, I felt relieved. She hadn't pretended to grieve me in private. She hadn't kept a secret shrine of guilt. She'd simply erased me. Completely and efficiently, like deleting an old email. At least I knew exactly who she was now. Dad stayed near the front door, watching for headlights. I went to find what we came for. My mother's home office was upstairs, a beautiful room with a mahogany desk and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Very impressive, very expensive, very Diane. And right behind her desk, exactly where I knew it would be, hung a portrait of herself. Some people hide their safes behind family photos or artwork they love. My mother hid hers behind a painting of her own face. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Diane Potter Hale, nothing will. The safe combination was her birthday. Of course it was. She'd never been creative about passwords, always choosing dates that celebrated herself. I punched in the numbers and heard that beautiful click. Inside, I found everything. Documents showing the trust transfer signed with forged signatures. Communication records between Diane and Victor dating back to before their marriage. Planning everything. Financial statements tracking exactly how my $4.2 million had been spent over 9 years. And at the bottom of the pile, a USB drive labeled VH Insurance. I plugged the drive into Diane's own computer. There were audio files, dozens of them. Victor had recorded his conversations with my mother, probably as leverage in case she ever tried to cut him out. Smart man. Evil, but smart. I played one of the recordings. My mother's voice filled the room, clear and cold and unmistakable. Just keep her contained until the trust fully vests in my name. Then I don't care what happens to her. I'd imagined hearing something like that for years. I'd wondered if it would break me, if the final confirmation of my mother's betrayal would shatter whatever was left of my heart. But sitting there in her office, listening to her discuss my imprisonment like a business expense, I felt nothing but calm. She'd shown me who she was. Now I had proof. I copied everything to my phone, then put the originals back. We needed the chain of evidence to be perfect. Howard had been very clear about that. Anything we took could be challenged in court, but anything the FBI found with a warrant was untouchable. I was about to leave when I noticed a folder I'd missed. It was tucked behind some tax documents, ordinary looking, easy to overlook, but the label caught my eye. DC Correspondence, Derek Chen, my Derek, my high school love who'd ended up with my stepsister. I opened the folder and felt my heart crack one more time. There were letters between Derek and Bethany, printed out and saved. Love letters, sure, but also something else. Plans, discussions. Bethany had told Derek the truth about me 3 years ago. She'd confessed that I was alive, imprisoned, not coming back. And Derek had responded not with horror, not with a plan to rescue me, but with relief. Thank God he'd written. I was worried this would come out someday. But if she's contained, we're safe. We can have the life we deserve, the life they deserved. Built on my grave, built on my grandmother's money, built on the assumption that I would rot in a farmhouse forever. Derek hadn't loved me. Maybe he never had. He'd loved the idea of the Potter fortune, and when Bethany offered him a cleaner path to it, he'd switch sides without hesitation. I took photos of the letters, not for evidence, for motivation. Headlights swept across the front windows. Dad's voice came urgent from downstairs. Someone's coming home early. I shoved everything back into the safe, closed the portrait, and moved to the hallway. Footsteps on the front porch, a key in the lock. I ducked into a guest bedroom closet and held my breath. It was Bethany. I could hear her stumbling, drunk, talking too loud on her phone. She was arguing with Derek about something trivial, wedding colors or invitation fonts. Her voice was shrill and slurred, so different from the polished image she projected in public. She stumbled past the guest room. She didn't check the office. She didn't notice anything wrong. She just complained her way to the master bedroom and slammed the door. I waited 10 minutes, then crept downstairs. Dad was pale but steady. We slipped out the back door and drove away without anyone seeing us. That night, we gave everything to Howard. The documents, the recordings, the financial trail. He listened to the audio files with an expression I'll never forget, a mix of disgust and satisfaction. "This is enough," he said, "more than enough. But Trinity, the FB, I wants to move quietly. Strategic arrests, controlled press release. Are you sure you want to do this your way?" I was sure, because my mother had spent 9 years believing she'd won. She'd thrown parties and bought mansions and erased me from existence, confident that her perfect crime would never be discovered. She deserved to find out the truth the same way I'd found out mine, sudden, public, and devastating. Sunday morning. Victor had discovered I was gone by now. I could imagine his panic, the frantic calls to my mother, the realization that their carefully constructed prison had finally failed. They'd assume I'd go to police. They'd start preparing lies, alibis, cover stories. They'd call their expensive lawyers and their connected friends. They'd try to paint me as unstable, traumatized, unreliable. But I wasn't going to the police, not yet. I sent my mother a text from a number she wouldn't recognize. Just 2 words. "Hi, Mom." No response for an hour. Then, finally, "Who is this?" I typed back, "I'm alive. Did you miss me?" This time, the response came fast. "This isn't funny. I'm calling the police." I smiled at that. The police. The same police she'd manipulated for 9 years. The same police who'd closed my case because Diane Potter Hale had powerful friends. I sent one more message. "Check your safe, Mother. The one behind your portrait." 20 minutes of silence. I could picture her rushing home from wherever she was, tearing through her office, staring at the evidence of her own crimes, wondering what I'd seen, wondering what I'd taken, wondering how much I knew. Her call came through. I didn't answer. She texted instead. "What do you want?" And here's where I could have been cruel. I could have demanded money or an apology or some dramatic confrontation. But I realized I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to understand. I wrote back, "I want to know why. Why did you do this to me?" Her response took 5 minutes. When it came, it was longer than anything she'd ever written to me in my entire life. "You were always a mistake, a reminder of your father, of a life I wanted to forget. Eleanor always loved you more than she loved me. She gave you everything and left me nothing. That money was supposed to be mine. I earned it, putting up with her lectures and her judgment for years. You didn't earn anything. You just existed. So yes, I corrected things. I made sure the money went where it belonged. You should have stayed gone, Trinity. You're just a mistake of my past that I want to forget." I read those words 3 times. Each time, they hurt a little less because she wasn't confessing to me anymore. She was confessing to the FBI agent standing right behind me, recording everything. I typed my final message to her. "Consider it your last wish." Then I made a call of my own. Not to Howard, not to the FBI, to the local news station. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Missing heiress found. Alive after 9 years. Mother accused of orchestrating kidnapping. The recordings were online. The documents were public. Diane's text confession was screenshot and shared 1,000,000 times. Every news channel, every social media platform, every podcast and blog and forum was talking about Trinity Potter and her monster of a mother. Diane's phone must have been exploding. Her friends, her colleagues, her country club acquaintances, all of them seeing the truth, all of them realizing they'd been charmed by a woman who'd imprisoned her own child for money. The FBI arrived at Diane's mansion in a convoy of black SUVs. Police cars followed, lights flashing. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures. It was the most public arrest in Ridgewood history, exactly what I'd wanted. Victor tried to run. Of course he did. He'd spent 9 years as the jailer, comfortable in his power, confident in his control. But when the FBI agents appeared at the back gate, all that confidence vanished. He sprinted toward the woods like a scared animal, got maybe 50 feet before 2 agents tackled him into the dirt. I watched from across the street. My father stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. We just watched the empire of lies collapse in real time. Inside the mansion, someone had started a fire. We learned later it was Victor, in his panic, trying to destroy evidence before he ran. He'd knocked over a candle or thrown papers into the fireplace. Something desperate and stupid. The curtains caught, then the drapes, then the home office where I'd found everything. Firefighters arrived within minutes, and here's the part that still makes me smile. The first truck on the scene was from my father's old station. The men who'd searched for me for 9 years, who'd put up posters and organized volunteers and never stopped believing I was alive. They were the ones who saved my mother's mansion from burning down. They could have let it burn. No one would have blamed them, but that's not who they were. That's not who my father raised them to be. Bethany was arrested trying to leave through the garage. She screamed the whole way to the squad car, screaming that it wasn't fair, that Trinity had always gotten everything, that she deserved her share too. The delusion was complete. Even now, she couldn't see herself as the villain. Derek was taken for questioning. He wasn't arrested immediately, but his involvement was clear. He'd known for 3 years and said nothing. He'd built a future on my captivity and called it love. A reporter approached me as the chaos unfolded. She asked the question everyone was thinking. Trinity, how do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. 9 years of darkness. 9 years of silence. 9 years of wondering if anyone remembered I existed. I feel like I finally woke up from a nightmare, I told her, and now everyone else has to face reality. The aftermath came fast. Victor and Diane were formally charged within 48 hours. Federal kidnapping, false imprisonment, fraud, conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, the public outrage deafening. No lawyer in the country wanted to touch their case. Even the expensive ones have limits. Rosa came forward as a witness. She testified about everything she'd seen and heard over 9 years. The basement, the farmhouse, Diane's annual visits to check on her imprisoned daughter. Her testimony was devastating, detailed, impossible to refute. In exchange for her cooperation, the FBI provided Rosa with protection and a path to legal status. She'd been undocumented, which was how Victor controlled her. He'd threatened deportation, separation from her family, destruction of everything she'd built in this country. For years, she'd lived under that threat, too scared to help me, too kind to ignore me completely. I visited her after her testimony. We sat in a small coffee shop, 2 women who'd survived the same monster. Thank you, I told her. You gave me my life back. She shook her head. You gave me my courage, she said. I watched you for years, refusing to break, refusing to sign those papers. I thought if you could stay strong, maybe I could too. We cried together. We laughed together. We ate pie and talked about the future instead of the past. The money came back to me, eventually. Not all of it. Diane had spent nearly $2 million on her lifestyle, and that was gone forever, absorbed into mansions and vacations and diamonds that had already been sold for legal fees. But $2.2 million remained in accounts, and the estate lawyers had another surprise. My grandmother, Eleanor, brilliant woman that she was, had created a secondary trust, a backup plan. She'd suspected something might happen. Even back then, she'd seen Diane for who she was and prepared accordingly. The secondary trust was smaller, but protected, untouchable by anyone except me. Total restored to Trinity Potter, $3.8 million. It wasn't about the money, really. It had never been about the money. But there was something deeply satisfying about knowing that my grandmother's final gift had survived my mother's greed. Eleanor had protected me even from the grave. My father's vindication came slower but sweeter. For 9 years, people had called him obsessed, crazy, a grieving father who couldn't accept reality. His own friends had staged interventions, begged him to move on, told him he was destroying himself chasing a ghost. Now those same people lined up to apologize. The fire chief who told him to stop looking, who'd said Trinity's gone and you need to accept that, showed up at Dad's door with a bottle of whiskey and tears in his eyes. The detective who'd closed my case sent a handwritten letter. Even Diane's friends, the ones who'd believed her tears and attended my memorial, they reached out with awkward apologies and offers to help. Dad accepted all of it graciously. He'd spent 9 years being called crazy, and he'd been right the whole time. He could afford to be gracious now. The fire station threw him a retirement party, a real one this time. They gave him a plaque that said, "Never stopped believing, never stopped fighting. He hung it in his living room, next to a photo of me as a baby, the same photo he'd carried in his wallet for 9 years. Derek's downfall was quieter, but equally complete. Once his involvement became public, everyone abandoned him. His family, mortified by the association, stopped taking his calls. His employer, a financial firm that couldn't afford scandal, fired him the same day. Even Bethany, facing her own charges, blamed him publicly, claiming he'd pressured her to stay silent. He became a cautionary tale. The man who chose money over morality. The man who could have saved me but chose comfort instead. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel anything at all. He'd made his choice years ago. Now he lived with it. A reporter asked me about my plans during one of the many interviews that followed. I was still adjusting to cameras, to questions, to being visible after so long in darkness. But this question made me smile. Well, I said, first I'm going to eat at every restaurant I missed for 9 years. Then I'm going to catch up on movies. I disappeared before the Marvel Cinematic Universe really got going, and I have a lot of homework to do. I'm still on Iron Man 2. The reporter laughed. America laughed. For the first time in 9 years, I laughed too. 1 month after everything happened, I visited my mother in county jail. She looked different without her makeup. Her hair salon appointments, her designer clothes. She looked old. Not dignified old, not graceful old. Just small and tired and ordinary. The glamour had been a costume, and without it, she was just a woman in an orange jumpsuit waiting for her life to end. She expected me to gloat. I could see it in her eyes, the defensive anger, the prepared speeches about how I'd ruined everything. She'd probably rehearsed this moment, practiced her cruelty, sharpened her words into weapons. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just wanted to see you one more time, I said, to tell you something. She waited, jaw tight, ready to fight. I forgive you. The words hit her harder than any insult could have. She blinked, confused, then angry. Forgive me? I don't need your forgiveness. I know, I said, but I needed to give it. Not for you, for me. Holding on to anger is exhausting, and I've spent 9 years being exhausted, so I'm letting go. I forgive you for what you did, and I'm walking away, and I'm never thinking about you again. I stood up. She called after me, something bitter and sharp, but I didn't hear it. I was already walking toward the door, toward the sunlight, toward the rest of my life. My father was waiting in the parking lot. He asked where I wanted to go. Home, I said. Grandma's house, my house now. Let's go home. The sentencing came 3 months later. Diane and Victor each received 25 years. No possibility of parole. The judge called it one of the most calculated, cruel cases of family betrayal he'd ever seen. He said the only reason he wasn't giving them life was because the law had limits, but that he hoped they'd spend every remaining day of their lives understanding what they'd destroyed. Bethany got 5 years, reduced for testifying against her father and stepmother. She cried in court, talked about how she'd been manipulated, how she'd been scared. Maybe some of it was true. Maybe she really had been afraid of Victor. But she'd also lived in my grandmother's house for years, worn my inheritance like a crown, smiled in photos while I counted days in darkness. I didn't feel sympathy. I didn't feel rage. I just felt done. Derek wasn't charged with anything technically. There's no law against knowing about a crime and staying silent when you're not a mandatory reporter. But his testimony, given reluctantly and full of self-serving excuses, was public record now. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew what he'd chosen. His LinkedIn says he works for some small company in another state now. I hope he's happy. I hope he wakes up every morning knowing exactly who he is. After the sentencing, Dad took me for ice cream. We went to the same shop we'd visited when I was a kid, before the divorce, before everything went wrong. The owner recognized us, cried a little, gave us free sundaes. I ordered the biggest thing on the menu, a hot fudge, whipped cream, the works. Dad watched me eat with tears in his eyes. Then he said, "Get another one if you want." I did. 9 years of dreaming about hot fudge sundaes, and it tasted even better than I remembered. I started a foundation 6 months after my rescue, the Potter Foundation, dedicated to missing persons cases. We fund private investigators, push police departments, support families who've been told to give up hope. In our first year, we helped 12 families, 12 people who'd been forgotten, dismissed, written off. Not all of them were found alive. But all of them were found. All of them got answers. All of them got closure. I speak at events now, something I never imagined doing. I talk about hope, about persistence, about the people who refuse to let me disappear. I talk about my father who spent his retirement savings on investigators and never stopped believing. I talk about Rosa, who risked everything to slip me a phone number. I talk about Howard, who took one look at my case and said, "This isn't over."